Good evening, and as you probably recall, the Friday night Dharma talk at 7 o'clock is usually taught by a Chiezan, who is the Sukansu or the prior of this monastery. He's off on a short sabbatical with his wife and son. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And he's been covering all of the Chinese lineage holders and also the Zen holders. And I don't have a very good memory, even though I've read quite a bit. Don't really retain much these days, probably due to my age. I've never had a great memory. So I have some notes here via this phone. I just wanted to mention a little bit about how I think it's important for all of us to go back, just like I have requested Chedan to do, to go back and study various lineage holders in the past and talk about basic Buddhist teachings by talking about the history, as he has talked about Huineng, and he's talked about Dogen Zenji and various other teachers. Can't name them all, but every week talks about someone. Talked about the five schools, which is takes quite a bit of memory work just to do that. Of course, you can also have some notes, and I think he worked some notes too. So it's just that I'm not used to. If I look at something, I start to get magnetized by what I'm looking at, and I forget about you guys. But so if you see me starting to get enthralled in what I'm looking at, just say, "Hey, Sokuzan, over here." So what I'm encouraging you to do is based on a suggestion by Mundo, actually, is why not talk about how important it is to connect with the lineages. And we have two lineages. We have a lot more than that, but we have the Soto Zen lineage going back to Dogen Zenji, who is the founder of our lineage. And then we have the Karmakagyu lineage going back through the 17 Karmapas and going back through my teacher, Chogyam Tongpa Rinpoche, who is the 11th Trungpa Tulku or incarnation of the Trungpa Tulkus, that particular incarnation of teachers. And so it's a big history back there. If you go back, it's just flooded with names and who did this and who said that, and when this happened, and which two teachers studied with which teacher, and which teachings were brought about or supported by this teacher, and so on. So I just want to read it just a little bit about Rangjung, the third Karmapa of the 17th Karmapa. He was the third one. Rangjung Dorje, self-existing, indestructible, self-existing. 1284 to 1339. So that's like what 50 some years. Not very long. He was recognized as at the age of 5 as the reincarnation of the previous Karmapa by Orjempa Rinchen Pao, and later who was also Orjempa Rinchen Pao was also a student of the second Karmapa, Karmapakshi, whose rupa or whose form sits on top of our Karmakagyu altar. I have a very strong connection with the second Karmapa. I have no idea why. I don't have any memory of anything. I just know that that particular teacher is very powerful to me. So, and he was later enthroned at Serfu Monastery, that he then studied both the Nyingma and Kagyu traditions. He took a full ordination at the age of 18. Longchenpa, who was a famous Nyingma teacher, they also studied together. They were contemporaries, and he was a little bit younger. But Longchenpa and Rangjung Dorje shared a particular close relationship, since they both counted Rinzin Kumaraza as one of their root teachers and studied together. The third Karmapa is responsible for introducing Dzogchen, which you probably all heard of Dzogchen. He was responsible for that, and into the Mahamudra tradition, as well as many eminent elements from Semde and Trekcho. Trekcho means cutting through. It's a kind of teaching where there's a cutting action. And bringing these two traditions together, it is said that during a retreat in his early 20s, he had a vision at sunrise of Vimalamitra and then Padmasambhava, who dissolved into him at a point between his eyebrows. At that moment, he realized and received all the teachings and transmissions of the Dzogchen Tantras. He wrote many volumes of teachings on Dzogchen and founded Karma Nyingtik lineage. So go on, but I thought I would just say that, and that's something that's just unavailable. That's a Rigpa wiki. It's like Wikipedia, only it's the Rigpa. Rigpa means knowledge. So there's all kinds of directions you can buy books on it. There's a series of books on the Karmapas and early teachers. There's the one book that talks about all the Karmapas, gives a brief synopsis of each one. So that would just be the Karmakagyu lineage, and that breaks down into I think it's traditionally called the 5 great and 8 lesser schools of the Karmakagyu. So different teachers will take it different directions because of a different way of teaching. There's just so much. There's so many different ways of doing it. I, as the leader of this particular, the abbot here and the teaching person here, I try to cover as much as we can. So we studied as many different ways of presenting the Dharma as possible, and we're doing more and more all the time, and we'll continue to do that, perhaps even when I'm gone. That's why it's the order when you get light. It's about bringing these lineages together and not saying, well, these are right and these guys are wrong and this shouldn't be this way. And well, we want to discuss this together. We want to talk about it together and understand it together, not decide who's right and who's wrong. Well, I think it might be good for questions. I'm not sure how much I can answer if it's specific historical stuff. Maybe not. Yes.
But with all these lineages, especially these two that you've had 2 teachers in, what is the most important thing for us to realize about these lineages?
They're all they're all Buddhist. They all profess to show you a way to understand what the Buddha taught, that everything is dependent on arisen. There's no singular situation called a person or personhood, and there's also no other, non-dual. This is a teaching that was around before the Buddha showed up. Just different ways of doing it. Some the Tibetans want you to do a lot of creation completion practice. This is a tantric approach to it, is to use deity yoga. In other words, create a deity in your mind stream, which represents your wisdom, and then interact with that either through mudras, through mantras, through visualizations of the various aspects of that deity, all of those situations, and then to be able to dissolve those back into the mind stream from which they arose as an imagination or creation. So in the Zen tradition, I'm not sure, is this the direction you're asking me about? In the Zen tradition, it shows up as a different way of doing it. There's some of that going on. There's a lot of mantra practice in Zen. There's a lot of ritual practice in Zen, but it doesn't show up. And it shows up in Soto Shu in Japan. They do a lot of ritual at Eiheiji Monastery, a lot more of that than they do of sitting practice of meditation. I have heard. I've not been there, but that's what I've heard from people who have been there and practiced there. My understanding is the very best thing you can do is to hold still and observe, train the awareness to watch the movement. Now you personally may need to go through creation completion where you're using the mind to generate images and dissolve them. That may be important for you to do. We do some of that here. Not a lot, but we do some of it. I allow people to go that direction if they want. If they want to, I will really support them. Some people have practiced extensively, practice like White Tara, which is about generating an image representative of your wisdom mind and dissolving and talking that image while it's showing up as a visualization. Specific question?
Think about it, something along the lines of what strength does a lineage provide us as practitioners?
I think it helps transcend just the opinion of the teacher. And not that a teacher's power, there are Advaita teachers who have the lineage of non-dual teachings that goes back, and they quite often, rarely does it show up, they don't have a teacher, but occasionally. But having a lineage that goes back through the centuries that is saying the same thing just in different ways, different tone of voice, different way of emphasizing things. But we have two lineages coming in this, so there's this kind of a hybrid. We're not doing what the Kagyu lineage is telling us to do. We're not doing what Soto Shu in Japan, the Zen tradition, is telling us to do. What are we doing? Tell me, what are we doing? Say it.
Created with all things.
But from the point of, I know that, but from the point of view of this lineage says this lineage says this, what does this person say? What are they saying? Pardon me?
Sit down, hold still.
Well, yes, but what? Can't you see what I'm getting at?
No.
Okay, anyone see what I'm getting at? No?
Trained mind.
Pardon me?
Trained mind.
Yeah, simply put, but I'm saying we ought, I guess what I feel it might be missing is we're using whatever shows up in the Kagyu tradition that looks valuable to this person, this teacher, whatever looks valuable shows up in the Soto Shu that looks valuable. We're doing it. We are doing classical Shikantaza with some modifications depending on the student. Modified somewhat. It might even fall into the Kagyu practice of Shine and Laktong, which is taking Shikantaza and dividing it up into parts, creating a meditator, and then having the meditator contemplate the spaciousness of the mind, or Vipassana, done in an orderly fashion. Whereas Shikantaza gives you the whole enchilada, so to speak, all at once, and then you might emphasize one part of it over the other based on your own karma. It's just a different way of, there's no right or wrong. It's just how are we going to train the mind? Well, I think there's value in both schools, but I think anytime either one of those schools locks down and says, we're right, and you should do it our way, this is a big, it's not only a misunderstanding, it does a disservice to everybody. Because everybody's karma, causes, and conditions, how Mozuku's dealing with her mind, how you're dealing with your mind, two completely different situations. Similarities, quite a bit different. So therefore, very necessary, I think, to practice a lot. As far as I'm concerned, everyone in here, if we could do it, would just be in retreat right now. Everybody's practicing a little bit, and we're doing a lot of Samo practice. We're taking care of children. So why is that? Because that's what our life is. We have children, and we have jobs, and we have needs, and we have bills and everything. So we aren't in ancient India where the whole community just saw the person as a monk and immediately, filled their bowl full of alms or full of food or full of whatever they needed. Not happening in our community. If you do that, you're considered a panhandler or a person with a cardboard sign that says, God bless you. Different deal altogether. Not a spiritual path. Just people that need money and help. We can't really do that, at least we haven't yet. There's a ritual practice in Japan. I think it's called takatsu. Somebody can correct me if someone knows more. That where they go out, I think once or twice a year or something, and traditionally just stand out. The monks stand out there with these straw hats that are like this. You can't really see their face. I'm not sure why that's important, but you can't see them. But they hold a bowl and they're in robes, and people come along and put money or checks or something. I presume I've not done that. That's still done as just a traditional way to do that. But maybe it's to respect that ancient tradition. Not done anymore. Now the community just supports. I stayed over there in a temple for place where my son Mason stayed for a couple of years. I stayed in that temple for about 3 weeks, and I saw that the community just supports the Ojo Sama cave in Otogawa. he just got complete support from the community. There were 600 families. They just supported him, sent money. They did not practice Zazen. Even Ojasama practiced Zazen very little. They had a small, whereas we have our major room here is the Zendo. We don't have a Buddha hall. We're endeavoring to make that happen. But over there's a huge Buddha hall and a little Zendo that's like a hallway with a Kasami mats in it. You could face one wall. Not wrong. It's just that that's what the culture had shows up over there after hundreds and hundreds of years. After having arrived there through that particular one through Dogen in what 1326, I think, when he came back from China. So, well, yes.
Why did you choose Rangjung Dorje of all the lineage?
I'm interested in him. He's the one that came right after the second Karmapa. I was interested in his, just interested in him, and I'm still looking into that. I just recently bought a book about him. I can't remember the woman who wrote the book, but I've read the introduction. I've read the whole book. But I'm not really, even if I had read the whole book, I doubt that I could get a very helpful, give you a very helpful talk, because my memory is not, I don't have a selective memory like I once had a few years ago. Even then, it wasn't great, but it was better than it is now. So I would have to come up with all kinds of notes, and I might as well just say, here's the book, read the book. And seems to be what I've read so far is quite interesting. And he even had some visions. Some of it's coming back to me now. He even had some visions about that he was. Some of the people, some of the history even says that he recognized himself as the third Karmapa, but others didn't. And then someone, it was Rinchen Pao, I think, who recognized him as a third Karmapa. But it is said in another area where he recognized himself because he had visions of having lived the life of Karmapa. He had memories of being Karmapa. And as many of you know, any of you looked into any kind of past life thing at all, it's all over the place. Memories of past lives. Ian Stevenson has a great book that I've read many years ago on past lives. It has nothing to do with Tibetan Buddhism or Buddhism at all. It's just people remembering that they lived before, remembering their mother's and father's name and where they lived. But this is kind of poo-pooed when someone brings it up when they're 4 years old. And usually it starts to disappear. So when someone is very young, 2, 3, 4, they're still maybe even confusing their current parents with their past life parents, or wondering what happened to their sister who was not even born in this lifetime. So lots of stories like that are quite fascinating, especially when there's some history that you can actually look at and see that something did actually occur at a certain time and place. Oh. Yes.
What is the difference between a Karmapa and a Tulku?
The same thing, but the tulku is a Sanskrit for it's a Tibetan for the Sanskrit word Nirmanakaya, or body. It's a Dharmakaya is the body of truth. Sambhogakaya is the body of bliss, and Nirmanakaya is just the Buddha body, the actual living Buddha. So Tulku is a living Buddha. There's lots of them. Tulkus are they've been recognized as having having lived before as a teacher. Well, quite a few of them out there, probably hundreds of, yes.
One of mine was Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, considered a Tulku?
Yes, he was a Tulku. He was the 11th Trungpa Tulku, a lineage that goes back to Trungmace. Trungmace is the word where the word Trungpa comes from. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. So yes, he was a Tulku, an incarnation of the 10th Trungpa. And when you can find that his story and who he was and how long he lived, and he was an incarnation of obviously the 9th, and going back to the first one. And there's some kind of story back there about who he was, how he was discovered, how there happened to be a person who was a teacher. And there's lots of them. Taisitu was one. a good example of a Kempo Socham Jamso was not a Tulku, but he's just a great teacher, he's a great yogi. Spent most of his life in retreat. And when he was invited to come out of retreat in 1977 by His Holiness the 16th Karmapa to, I think he was going to found or going to head up a monastery. I think it ended up being a nunnery. Do you remember that story? So he did that, and then he came to the United States, studied, and began teaching students of Trungpa Rinpoche and other people. I never met him personally, but I've studied his material. Kempo Socham Jamso's progressive stages of meditation on emptiness is something we have studied together as a Sangha. Very, very powerful book that goes through lots of different aspects of the teachings on emptiness, so on. Brother Young.
Yuhong Baoying, I know during the daily 6 p.m. practice, we practice Shikantaza. Do you think it's possible, like, you can teach a practice in Kagyu lineage, if possible, one day? Baoying?
Yes, I can teach it to you right now. I can teach it. It's very simple practice that I practiced for decades and taught it. I was trained how to teach this in 1978. I've taught it to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students. Nothing recently, but a few times I've taught it individually because of the way a person is working with their mind. It looks like it might be better for them to work on that particular approach. And all it is sit down, hold still, eyes open still. That's still the same. Your posture would be hands on knees rather than cosmic mudra. Although my teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, said this is fine too, if you want to do this. He was quite aligned with the whole Zen tradition, as you probably know. He even said, he even used to joke that he was going to, after he died, he was going to come back as a Japanese businessman. And that's probably because at that time in the 1980s, Japanese business was very, very successful. So I think he liked that. So to come back to it, simple instruction is sit down, hold still, sit symmetrical, same teaching there, sit on a cushion or sit in a chair if you have to, and then watch your breath. And specifically, as Trungpa taught it, this is a little bit different than, say, His Holiness the 17th Karmapa would teach it. But the way he taught it and the way I was taught to teach, I was instructed to teach that, was watch the breath go flow. And as soon as the breath goes out, just watch it go out. Don't necessarily follow the in-breath, but if you do follow the in-breath too, don't worry about it. Just put the emphasis, because the out-breath is more of a letting go feeling. It just goes whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. It's just going out. And when thoughts arise, as soon as you see that you're thinking, label that thinking and return to the out-breath. That's the instruction. And I would add to that, don't maintain it so much as return to it. So it's not about staying on it. Although it has been taught, some people teach it differently. And some people say, try to stay on the out-breath. I don't think that's a good idea. And that's probably why I eventually went back to my original practice from 1974 or 74, which was Shikantaza. Just return to the label thinking, return to the out-breath, and do that over and over and over. This is a shamatha vipassana, and that will eventually show up as vipassana. Eventually, that will start to come apart, and you'll just receive. You might be even taught that at some point, but you will be asked to practice that for many years. I was never really taught directly vipassana until much later.
Yuhong Baoying, so what you're saying that the out-breath is the anchor of the practice, but just don't maintain that, right?
Yeah. I did not use that word, but I could see where you would come up with that word. And go ahead and practice it. And practice it for a couple of months. See what it's like. And
But is
yes.
Is there a sound when you the out breath, when you breathe out, like you had a sound, like
I was just using a sound. So when you breathe out, you have that feeling of air coming out, but you might not hear anything go whoosh, but it's like that. I'm just kind of emphasizing that letting go feeling of the breath goes out. It's like that's the last thing you do before you die is breathe out. You certainly don't breathe in. So it's like a little tiny death. You're just dying to everything. You're dying to everything. And you're dying again. And you don't recover. So in other words, you don't emphasize the coming back part. You can get into all kind of psychological gymnastics around why that's the case. Seems to be a pretty good practice. I practiced it myself for many, many years and taught it to, as I said, hundreds, maybe even thousands of people. You were to go back and count them up. Taught it from 1978 on, yes.
When you're behind.
Thank you.
1993.
I taught you in 93,
And I do have a question,
yes.
with Shikantaza, we face the wall, but you taught me to face out. Look down.
Yes, very similar. You don't have a wall in front of you. You would sit face out into the room and then you still have your gaze down towards the carpeting and the floor. But you wouldn't necessarily raise your gaze. When you begin to learn Vipassana, the second part of that, shamatha, Vipassana, or shine and laktam, which mean the same thing. Mindfulness, awareness means the same thing. You would raise your gaze. That's the only instruction for Vipassana, is stop counting, not counting, stop following the breath, don't do anything. So we're right back to Shikantaza again. Raise your gaze, just look across the room and just observe. You can start out with that. And then if you need to, at some point, follow your breath, and there's nothing wrong with that. As the instruction goes, if you remember what I say, watch what moves. You can follow your breath all day and you're doing exactly what I said. Because it's not about maintaining the breath, it's about watching what moves. You might watch 15 breaths come and go. You might watch your diaphragm, and then you might go from that to the mind stream, and then you go from the mind stream to the memory of what happened yesterday when you were talking to the grocer. So it's about watching what moves, not about maintaining it. And the idea of moving from one moving thing to another, that's what makes it ordinary and natural. And that's what makes it line up with the way your life functions. Your life is about, you're aware of this, you're walking out to the parking lot, things are changing, coming and going. But this is this thing where your body's holding still and you're just watching the movement. That's why Shikantaza is so powerful. It doesn't set up an artificial scaffolding for what you should be doing and what you should be accomplishing, and how aware you are, and all that. Focus. Yes.
With bowing, sometimes I've heard you given instruction to notice the space in which things arise. Is that a Vipassana instruction?
It's in that area. Eventually, you'll just look at the space. And that happens if there's ego, if there's an aspect of consciousness that you think is somebody, that area will start to freak out. That's how you know you have work to do. If you're afraid of anything, if you're seduced by anything, if you really give a shit about anything, I say it bluntly like that because I'm saying it's like that. It's like, but it's also, it goes the other way where you really are very concerned about other people that are having difficulty and suffering. You can't help but help them. You can't help it. It's not that you're getting a big credential for it. I'm so this wonderful. I can't believe how completely generous I am. You walked into the Hojo a little while ago to ask me a question. I was going to sleep. Did I say, I'll talk to you later? I didn't even know that I started answering your question until you left. And Ondo pointed out that I was going to sleep. And instead of going to sleep, I woke right up and started talking to you about your question about gawns. It's not important. I'm just saying I'm not deciding. I meet everything where it's at. And so it doesn't give me a big credential. Oh, wonderful Sokuzan. It's just that I can't help it. It's out of my hands. And if you see what this is, you'll see that this whole world is out of your hands. Every negative thought, positive thought, neutral thought that arises is arising without a self. We tack the self on. It's just dependent origination. None of your business. The worst terrible thought in your mind stream is none of your business. But you will make it your business, or I'll make it my business by thinking I've got to get rid of that, or I've got to blame him or her because they said this, and that's why I'm feeling this. It's just an incredible melodrama that might as well be a movie. Well,
Mozuku bowing, when you say you won't care how you feel or
I don't mean it's dismissive, like disrespectful. You can be extremely disrespectful to other people's suffering.
is the kind of not caring about how you feel or what happens to you, is that distinct from like a resignation or a giving up?
No, there's no action there. There's no one there, and you don't give up after it's an illusion. What's to give up? You don't have to get rid of your ego. There's no reaction. Don't do anything with it but receive. And then any production that needs to happen it'll show up. You walk in the hojo, I'm falling asleep, you walk in the hojo, and my outflow is about you. My production is about you. But I can't do that if I'm producing stuff I want to do and don't want to do it. I need to go to sleep and you need to leave, come back later, I'm tired. Not gonna happen. Anybody here ever see me tell you to get out of my hojo because I'm well, there's one person. But I'm talking about because I don't want to talk to you, or because I'm too tired, or because I don't feel up to it, or anything. I just can't do that. Mozuku was laughing at one point because she was kind of coming after me. Remember that? You don't think you were coming after her. You were trying to get me to believe in your story about something. And I kept saying, no, that's not. And then you just were insistent. And this is not a compliment, but it's because of your intelligence and your persistence and your doggedness about that I didn't have any choice but to say, get out of my hojo. And I just did that recently to other people. I can't help but teach that way. I don't decide. I'm not trying to be mean to you, but you didn't leave, which is pretty good. So that was the teaching. So you received the teaching and you stayed there. I think I might have told you twice to get out. 3 times, okay. Yeah, and you still stayed. So it's pretty dogged. I just proved the point. You're dogged about it. Not going to give up. And I like that. There's nothing to accomplish, so you didn't have to leave. It's a teaching that's happened. And it was about pointing at your insistence on trying to get me to think a certain way because you'd already figured out what your problem was. And you were trying to get me to kind of agree to it. You may not remember that, but you don't have to. I remember it. I wouldn't say that to you if I weren't getting kind of exasperated about someone asking me something and then plugging your ears. So what should I do? About that? Get out of here. So you didn't leave. So which told me that you understand on some level what it is I'm pointing at. More. Ishin.
Bowing. Returning to combining two traditions, what was the purpose of joining Kagyu and Soto tradition in the form of our lineage? Bowing.
Well, hybrid means that 2 things come together, but I didn't join anything. I'm not bringing together. They just, all I'm saying is I see what has value in the Soto tradition. I see what has value in the Kagyu tradition based on this old man who was raised by 2 factory workers that has I have no degree. I've studied in college a little bit, but I have no degree. All of my life is spent studying the Dharma, amongst a lot of other things, but the Dharma. So therefore I'm doing this how it looks to me. I see it doesn't. I tried to look at joining a Buddhist community in Detroit. Igunya was with me. We went over there and looked, why start something here if there's something already there we can join? And I went over there to that. How many years ago was that? 2007. Went over there and just couldn't do it. I could not align myself or ask her to align herself with that particular way of teaching the Dharma. As far as I'm concerned, it's not teaching the Dharma. It was someone who's promoting themselves. I'm not going to say their name. And they may not be doing it. Maybe they last week or 3 years ago realized their Buddha nature. It's very possible, but they had not at that time. How do I know that? I didn't. I just knew that we couldn't be there. We couldn't. They were not doing what I wanted to do. So we came back here, and I could go through the whole description of it, but basically it's just, it happens because you understand what it is, and you don't get in the way of what needs to happen. And so next thing you know, here we are in 2024, we have a monastery. We have people who want to be monks, who want to dedicate their life to the Dharma. And I'm all about helping people do that, even if it's only 10 or 15 people. Doesn't matter. There's no promotion going on here that I know of. More of a discouragement. I might say, don't do anything else you have to. Jishin.
Jishin Bowing, thank you. I think you explained already about the value of Kagyu and Soto. I understand Shikantaza and Soto. Shikantaza is a part of the Soto which you value. What is about Kagyu, which you pointed as something valuable to implement in our practice, Bowing?
Well, it's going to take a while because this is the tantric tradition is hundreds and hundreds of years old, and I practiced it. I've done millions of mantras, visualizations, mudras, and we're still doing those. We just did, in fact, you did it with us today. We did the sadhana mahamudra, which is a very small sadhana. Sadhanas are much bigger than that. That's a very small sadhana that is available to the general public. There's lots of visualizations there, and we are slowly, or I am slowly introducing more complicated forms into that sadhana. And people are not so interested. I think the only other person there that attended that was Chisho. It's not about trying to get everybody to come and join necessarily. I think there were only 4 of us monks there. And it was the first time that a woman ever led the sadhana in this monastery that I know of, isn't it? And that was Ondo. And of course, you might not know this, but she spent a 30-day solitary retreat out in the woods in the Shugyoan practicing that sadhana. So I just didn't just put somebody up there and say, here, lead the sadhana. And not only her, but several other monks have spent that long, sometimes longer, in solitary retreat, learning that sadhana. I do everything very slowly. So I'm not going to suddenly have everybody doing 100,000 prostrations, though that's probably coming, or some form of it. Or 100,000 mantras, or 100,000 offerings to the mandala, or a million supplications to the karmapas. Although I've done all those practices, it's not easy, and it doesn't necessarily guarantee enlightenment. It just means that now you can start doing the actual sadhana, which is in the millions. The Tibetans are relentless about using forms to hammer on you until you realize your true nature. I don't think that's necessary. I've been hammered a little bit, so I'm coming out of my experience rather than out of some kind of belief in something. That being said, I don't want to get rid of that. I think a lot of it is very valuable. So I want to do some of that. And I want to also do some of the a little bit softer or more open way of practicing that was taught by Dogen Zenji. So we can use all of that, but I'm not putting things together. I'm looking at them until I just see what needs to come together, and what needs to come together is what comes together. What doesn't come together doesn't need to. But it's that kind of thing. I don't know what's going to happen next, and it's not a problem. Good question, though. I'm not asked questions in that area, and so therefore it's an extremely good question. It gives me a chance to respond to something that I know about, and to me is obvious, but may not be to others. So if you have other questions in that area or any area, please don't hesitate.
Jishin Bowing, I don't have a question in this area, but I would like to say thank you for explanation. It's especially reading Sadhana of Mahamudra and the background of it. It's good to understand maybe a little bit deeper of how those practices are created. And
yes.
Thank you for sharing it with
Yes,
us.
as I said, thank you for the question. So Milka,
Milka Bowing, a question from Ath in the UK. Do you think that, I don't know if I'm saying, is it Kambaka, retention of the breath, pranayama, add extra advantage than merely focusing on out breath only? Thank you kindly.
thank you for the question, Ath, and I would say no. There is some of that practice, working with the breath in that way in pranayama in tantric practice that I've done. I don't teach any of it, but I've done some of that. There's lots of practices I've done that I've never even mentioned in here, to this Sangha. It's just not necessary to do that. That doesn't mean that 3 weeks from now, that might show up, that might be something necessary to do. I do everything as it arises. I don't decide anything ahead of time. But to respond to your question more, maybe generically, I would say, I don't think it helps particularly. But if you have a teacher who he or she or they are teaching that, and you have a strong connection with that teacher, or perhaps perhaps some kind of pranayama, or working with the different nostrils and working with the channels in the back, which is tied in with that pranayama. Maybe you should be doing that. But have a teacher, don't just do it out of a book. Or you could say, well, what if the teacher wrote a book? Well, okay, do that. Just go slow. Go slow. Train your mind, but go slow. Don't do anything unless you have to do it. Don't meditate unless you have to do it. There a further question?
Hold on, it seems like you have a different relationship with a lineage than we do. It's like we're a generation removed from the Tibetan.
Not as long as you have, because this is here. No, you're not removed from. I'm certainly not removed. You just chanted the Sadhana Mahamudra. They did a wonderful job doing that. It shows that you practiced hard that month you were in retreat with that. You can't just go in and chant that sutra like that without doing it the same way. Sokuzan couldn't either, without really working at it. So your connection, you're making your connection to the lineage. It just may not be in terms of how you think the connection would be. It's working in an area of consciousness that thoughts do not have access to. They have some access, but if they go in there, then they start looking for some kind of proof. That's ego. But consciousness doesn't need proof for anything. It just sees everything as it is. And as it is, Rangdung Dorje, the third Karmapa, or Karmapakshi, or Chusen Kempa, all of those lineage holders, and the Mikyo Dorje, and who else is mentioned? You remember any? Mikyo Dorje. Which one is he? The sixth or the eighth? Okay, who's the eighth? I can't remember either. But those something about those, they come with the force of the lineage. You have to remember that literally thousands and thousands of people have gone into retreat with these same images, and that's what we do when we did the protector's supplication. That's powerful. I've been doing that for that protector's supplication for 50 years. I think it's only been recently that I've been doing it again because we're doing it here with our own version of it, which includes the Order of Immediate Light. So people are weaning away since the Sokuzan usually ends about 1:45. So I guess we could do the same thing. 45 minutes is pretty good. So, okay. Very good. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to talk about the Buddhist, what is it just called?
Buddhist teaching.
Basic Buddhist teachings. Yeah, thanks. I think I gave him the assignment. You think that I would better remember what I told her to do.
We'll dedicate the merit.
We will.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho san shi shifu shi son bu sam oko sa oko ja horomi. The 10 directions, the 3 times, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.
Time to go roller skating?
Let me.
You have a, isn't Shay's on it, doesn't it?